Good day. My name is Eloise Costandius and I'm an Associate Environmental Consultant with SLR. This presentation provides an overview of the Hoogland projects. SLR has been appointed by Redcap Energy to undertake the environmental authorization processes for 4 wind farms and 2 40-kilometer long power lines that connect these projects to the national electrical grid via a substation on the adjacent authorized Nieuweveld wind farms. These activities require authorization via environmental impact assessment processes in accordance with the National Environmental Management Act and a few other associated laws. After listening to this presentation, but before submitting any comments, interested and affected parties should refer to the draft scoping report or the pre-application reports for the details specific to each application and endeavour to align comments with the information provided in the specific reports. The reports can be freely downloaded and the details on how to do this, as well as details on where to submit written comments, are provided at the end of this presentation. The main objectives of these reports that are now out for comment are, firstly, to provide a description of the project and the individual project components and activities, and also to describe the approach to and/or project alternatives that have or will be assessed as part of the environmental process being undertaken. Secondly, to provide a description of the project site and the environmental baseline or site characteristics that may be impacted by the project and its related activities. This description should identify the key defining aspects and features that characterize the site, as well as any special or sensitive features that require special consideration. Third, to identify a list of potential impacts that may arise should the project proceed, and which must be assessed in detail in the impact assessment phase, and which would inform a decision by the authority on the acceptability or not of the project. And lastly, to present a plan of study or way forward for the impact assessment phase, setting out what impacts will be assessed, how, and by whom. Interested and affected parties are invited to review the reports and confirm that there are no major gaps in the plan of study or way forward for the assessment or omissions regarding the site or the impacts that may arise. Any inputs must be submitted in writing so we may consider, respond, and revise the report if required. In this way, the environmental impact assessment reports will be able to provide answers to the key issues raised by the community, and the project can adapt to the opportunities and constraints presented. We rely on the community to raise issues as this improves the quality of the environmental process. We encourage interested and affected parties to engage the information and submit comments or inputs at each public engagement opportunity throughout the process. We consider every comment and will provide a written response. Now for an overview of the projects. The high-lying area north of Beaufort West, known as Nieuweveld, has good wind characteristics and was identified by Redcap as a potential location for wind farms. This map shows the project location in relation to the government's defined Central Strategic Transmission Corridor, shown in purple stripes, and the Beaufort West Renewable Energy Zone, known as REDS for short, shown as a yellow area with a close-up shown in the inset box. Being located in one of these areas dictates the type of environmental process to be followed, which will be explained later on in the presentation. These areas are identified by the government as being suited to renewable energy or grid development. Redcap has environmental authorization for 3 other wind farms in this area, known as the Nieuweveld North, West, and East wind farms, and a 120-kilometer grid connection to Beaufort West from the approved Nieuweveld Collector Substation situated on the Nieuweveld East wind farm. This map provides the location and overview of the 4 Hoogland project sites. The northern wind farm cluster comprising Hoogland 1 and Hoogland 2 wind farms is shown in green and yellow. The northern grid connection, which connects these 2 wind farms to the Neverveld collector substation, is shown in purple stripes. The southern wind farm cluster comprising Hoogland 3 and Hoogland 4 wind farms is shown in blue and red. The southern grid connection is shown in red stripes. Redcap's Neverveld projects to the east is shown as a purplish outline. The southernmost point of the wind farms is approximately 10 kilometers north of the Karoo National Park and outside of the defined Karoo National Park buffer zones. The northern cluster wind farms are located east and west of the R381, approximately 14 kilometers from Loxton, and the southern cluster wind farms are situated approximately 6 kilometers to the west of the R381 and about 45 kilometers northwest of Beaufort West. The sites are mostly within the Beaufort West local and central Karoo district municipalities of the Western Cape. The southern wind farm, Hoogland 3, currently includes a small area in the Northern Cape in the Karoo Hoogland local municipality in the Namakwa district municipality. And the northern wind farms will include some watercourse crossing upgrades in the Ubuntu local municipality in the Pixtikaseme district municipality. We now look at the wind farm components themselves. The main components of a wind farm are the wind turbines. As turbine technology is continually evolving, it is not possible at this early stage in the development process to specify the exact turbine model and specification, or even what would be available in the marketplace. Assumptions have been made as to the maximum possible area of impact by the potential turbine blades based on a range of turbine sizes. This area of impact is referred to as the exaggerated rotor swept area envelope, and the specifications are shown on this slide. The exact number and location of turbines is still to be determined through the environmental impact assessment process, but each farm will be capped at 60 turbines and 420 megawatts of electrical production. Refer to the report for more details about the turbines. In addition to turbines, there are a number of other types of infrastructure required. At each turbine there will be temporary and permanent hard stand areas. Then there will be gravel access roads to provide access to the turbines. Medium voltage underground cables of a maximum of 33 kilovolts connect each turbine to the substation. In addition, where there are environmental or technical constraints, short sections of medium voltage overhead power lines may be required also to link the turbines to the substation. Each wind farm will have 1 or 2 substations that collect the medium voltage electricity via these cables and steps it up to 132 kilovolts. The substation yard will also house operation and maintenance buildings. Alongside each substation, it is proposed that a battery energy storage system is installed, which allows for a more continuous source of electricity supply to the grid. Lastly, the development will also require temporary construction areas, including construction camps, concrete batching sites, concrete tower plant, and laydown areas for equipment and materials. This map provides an example of a wind farm layout showing the various infrastructure types. On this slide we can see some examples of the infrastructure just mentioned. In the top left there is a photo of a turbine being erected by a crane. The top right photo shows the construction of a turbine foundation. The bottom left photo shows a substation, and the bottom right photo shows one of the types of battery facilities being considered for the project. As mentioned previously, The power that is collected at the substation of each wind farm is stepped up to 132 kilovolts at the wind farm substation, and then is transferred through a switching station next to the substation, along a 132 kilovolt line to the Neverveld collector substation, where it will enter the national electricity grid. Typical grid connection components therefore include a switching station, overhead lines supported on pylons, and gravel roads to access these lines. There's an example of a switching station depicted on this slide, which shows an Eskom switching station on the left, alongside the wind farm substation on the right. Note that only the switching station will be part of the grid connection, and the substation will belong to the wind farm development. On the right, there's a photo of a monopole pylon that will typically be used for the Hoogland grid connections. Since the exact alignment of the power line is not yet known, a 5-kilometer corridor between the switching stations and the Neverveld collector substation has been identified for assessment. This map shows the footprint of the 4 wind farm projects, with the 2 grid connection corridors both leading to the Neverveld collector substation. As mentioned in the introduction, the southern wind farms fall within a REDS and therefore qualify for a shorter environmental assessment process known as a basic assessment. This process also has a shorter decision-making period, whereas the northern wind farms fall outside the REDS and are subject to a standard scoping and environmental impact assessment process. In addition, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment has agreed that each wind farm cluster can be undertaken as a combined application under Regulation 11 of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations to reduce the amount of reporting. Similarly, the northern grid connection does not qualify for a REDS basic assessment process and is subject to a standard basic assessment. However, the southern grid connection, being mostly in the REDS, will qualify for a REDS basic assessment process with the shorter decision-making period. Therefore, the 6 projects, which each require their own authorization, have been packaged for the environmental process as shown in this slide. So, what do these processes mean for you? Well, in short, a basic assessment process usually only has one round of public participation, and a scoping and environmental impact assessment has 2, at the scoping and EIA stage, respectively. However, REDCap would like to make sure the process is more robust and afford the public a second opportunity to comment on the 3 basic assessment reports. This additional step in the process has been called a pre-application report, as it occurs before the application is submitted and is voluntary. The public participation process, or PPP for short, is a critical part of the environmental process, and it is going to be integrated for all 6 applications so as to try and avoid having numerous overlapping and confusing processes. Therefore, in March 2022, SLR is conducting the first round of PPP, which will be for the scoping report for the Northern Wind Farm cluster, along with the pre-application reports for the Northern Grid Connection, the Southern Wind Farm cluster, and the Southern Grid Connection. In August 2022, SLR will hold a second round of public participation to seek comment on the EIA report for the Northern Wind Farm cluster, along with the basic assessment reports for the Northern Grid Connection, the Southern Wind Farm cluster, and the Southern Grid Connection. To inform the scoping and pre-application reports, which are the subject of this public participation process, REDCap has undertaken a screening and iterative design process with SLR, the specialists and the engineers. This involved the consolidation of spatial sensitivity mapping from the specialists shown on the next slide, and designing the wind farm to avoid these constraints as far as possible. The specialists have then undertaken an assessment on this design and provided further recommendations. This will be refined further in the next stage of the project. An example of the sensitivity mapping is shown in this slide. Different constraints were identified for the different types of infrastructure, and more information on this process and the mapping can be found in the respective reports. The turbine no-go areas are shown for Hoogland 1 wind farm on the left-hand side, and the no-go areas for roads and underground cables are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. This slide shows the different specialist studies required for the wind farm assessments. These include heritage and archaeology, paleontology, visual, socioeconomic, agriculture, geotechnical, noise, shadow flicker, traffic, climate change, ecology, reptiles, bats, birds, and aquatic ecology. Specialists have identified potentially significant impacts that they believe need to be assessed in detail in the EIA. We will not go into the detail of these impacts in this presentation, but encourage interested and affected parties to refer to the scoping and pre-application reports and confirm that the list of identified impacts covers the critical issues or provide a written comment where not. Each specialist has provided a separate report which is available, and they're appended to the main reports. These provide a detailed description of the site and the environmental baseline against which the identified impacts will be assessed. The specialists have also undertaken a preliminary assessment of the identified impacts so that interested and affected parties can get a preliminary indication of what the impact significance ratings are likely to be. These assessments will, however, continue to be refined in the impact assessment phase and as and when additional information becomes available. Now for the key impacts. The impacts are rated before and after the application of proposed mitigation measures. The most significant impacts, those which were still rated as medium or high, have been summarized in this slide. The medium negative impacts include the following: impacts from ground disturbance during construction, impacts from the loss of bird habitat, impacts from the collision of birds with turbines, visual impacts of the wind farm components including substations, overhead lines and the N1 bypass, as well as lighting at night, impacts to the cultural landscape, impacts to intersection safety, and impacts on tourism. The visual intrusion of the turbines in the Karoo landscape is rated as being of high negative significance. Most of these negative impacts will be exacerbated when considered in combination with the impacts from the Niveveld projects, with the only high cumulative impact being from the visual intrusion of the turbines. Medium or high positive impacts are expected in relation to the expenditure during all stages of the project. When considered in combination with the Niveveld projects, cumulatively very high positive impacts can be expected in relation to the funding of socioeconomic development, enterprise development, and shareholding during the operational phases of these projects. Lastly, climate change impacts from the net avoided emissions can also be expected to be very high positive impact of the project. This slide shows which documents are currently available for comment. This includes the draft scoping report for the Hoogland Northern Wind Farm Cluster and pre-application reports for the Hoogland Northern Grid Connection, Hoogland Southern Wind Farm Cluster, and the Hoogland Southern Grid Connection. Non-technical summaries are also available in English and Afrikaans. Now looking at the way forward in the process. As shown on this slide, following the end of this public participation period, The site layout will be finalized and informed by the specialist recommendations, as well as relevant information that has arisen during the public participation process and any new data becoming available. In response, additional specialist work will be undertaken where required and specialist reports or findings updated accordingly where relevant. Thereafter, a draft environmental impact assessment report will be prepared for the Northern Wind Farm Cluster, and a draft basic assessment will be prepared for each of the Southern Wind Farm Cluster, the Northern Grid Connection, and the Southern Grid Connection projects. Interested and affected parties will be notified of the availability of these reports for review and comment. We hope this presentation has provided you with a good overview of the proposed projects, the environmental processes being undertaken for the projects and how they interact with each other, the potential impacts from the projects, some insight into the relevance of the information being released at this stage, and also provided some guidance regarding the nature of the comments being elicited from you and how they would guide the environmental processes being undertaken. The reports can be downloaded from the SLR website, and they are downloadable even if you have no data. That's at the addresses provided on this slide. If you have any issues sourcing the information, please contact us at the details provided on this slide. Written comments should be submitted to SLR at the details provided on this slide by the 22nd of April 2022. We look forward to your comments, and please also do not hesitate to contact us with any queries or issues. Please also feel free to disseminate this presentation to anyone you think may be affected or interested in the project. Thank you very much.